"I'd like to make a toast," Josh announced, lifting his glass like he was about to crown himself king. The room quieted. His brand new Denver living room glowed with warm bulbs and congratulatory chatter, paper gift bags at our feet. His expression had that familiar shine, the look he wore anytime he felt the spotlight heat on his face. To fresh starts. New keys and... He paused, milking the moment. To Grandpa's memory. A hush rolled through the crowd. 4 days. That's how long it had been since we said goodbye to the man who taught us to fish before we could ride bikes. I raised my glass like everyone else, throat tight, the grief too raw to swallow. "Speaking of Grandpa," Josh continued, setting his drink on the coffee table, "I've got news." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a creased envelope. Something in the way his eyes flicked to me made my stomach go cold. Like he knew a secret and wanted me to feel it land. Before he passed, "Grandpa gave me this letter," he said, voice projecting to every corner of the room. He wanted me to have the lake house. The room burst into startled whispers. My parents smiled, proud, relieved, already picturing family summers. Teresa clapped, glittering beside him. Across the room, my cousin Jenna glanced at me, confusion bright in her eyes. She knew how close Grandpa and I were. She knew how much that cabin meant to us. I didn't move. Couldn't. The cabin wasn't just an address. It was the place I'd spent almost every weekend for 3 years, tightening hinges, scrubbing the dock, listening to Grandpa tell stories as the sun melted into the water. Josh? He'd dropped by twice in 5 years, then complained about spotty Wi-Fi. Also, 3 weeks ago, Grandpa had pressed a small wooden box into my hands. His old cedar cigar box. "Don't open it," he'd said, eyes warm with mischief and certainty. "Not until the moment it matters." I hadn't opened it. Not once. Now as Josh unfolded his letter, a wave of wrongness washed over me. Grandpa's hands had shaken so much in his last weeks that signing a receipt took 2 tries. Yet the signature I glimpsed from where I stood was smooth. Easy. Practiced. "That's great, Josh," I managed, the smile on my face feeling stapled in place while my thoughts sprinted. I needed to see the box. I needed to know. I murmured something about the bathroom, slipped down the hallway, and texted Jenna with shaking thumbs. "Need to check something at home." "Can you cover for me?" "Got you," she replied seconds later. "I'll say work called." This is weird. The back door clicked behind me and autumn air cooled my lungs. On the drive, streetlights smeared into gold lines. Memories crowding the windshield. Grandpa's laugh when I failed to skip a stone. The way he'd point out constellations and name them like old friends. The stubborn lock that only opened if you jiggled it just so. At my apartment, I went straight to the closet, dug past winter coats, and pulled out the cedar box. Even closed, it smelled like him. My fingers hovered. "Not until the moment it matters," he'd said. This was that moment. I lifted the lid. Inside, neatly folded papers. A sealed envelope with my name in his unsteady script. A small brass key that fit the roll-top desk at the cabin. I unfolded the top document and my breath snagged. A notarized deed. Dated 6 months ago. The lake house transferred to me, completed, filed, airtight, under it. A letter in the unmistakable wobble of his last months. "My dearest Jules, by the time you read this, I've likely wandered off where the fish don't run out. I'm giving you the cabin while I'm still here to avoid ugliness later. You loved it like I did. Your brother never took to it. Not a crime, just a difference. If he contests, it's properly notarized and recorded. A copy sits with my attorney, Harold Thompson. Take care of our spot. Take care of yourself." The words blurred. I pressed the heel of my hand to my eyes until the room steadied. The cabin was already mine. Not part of the estate. Not up for debate, my phone buzzed. Messages stacked from my parents, bright with exclamation points. "Then Josh, nice exit. You can still visit the place, if you ask nicely." Heat rose in my chest, then cooled. Grandpa had warned me 100 times. When you're holding the truth, you don't have to shout. The quiet kind lands hardest. I gathered the documents, set them carefully back inside, and shut the lid. The box felt heavier now, like it carried more than paper, like it carried the next step. The party would still be going. I grabbed my keys. On the way back, I texted Jenna. "How many people left?" Mostly family. Guests headed out. You coming? Yes. I parked a block away and sat for a moment, the cedar box on the passenger seat and the night humming outside. I thought of Grandpa on the porch swing, the way he'd tilt his head when I asked what to do. I heard his answer as clearly as if he were beside me. Do it right. Do it with grace. I carried the box to Josh's door and knocked. He opened it with his practiced smirk already forming, until he saw what I was holding. Work emergency wrapped up already? He asked, voice fishing for a fight. We need to talk, I said, walking past him into the living room. My father studied the letter in his hands, brows knit. My mother and Teresa were deep in a conversation about light renovations, like paint could rewrite history. Jenna watched from the corner, tense and ready. Jules is back, Mom announced, too bright. We were just talking about Josh's wonderful surprise about the cabin. Perfect, I said, setting the cedar box gently on the coffee table. Because that's exactly why I'm here. Josh's face tightened. He recognized the box. Of course he did. What's that? He asked anyway. Something Grandpa gave me, I said evenly. 3 weeks ago. He told me to open it when it mattered. I met his eyes. It matters. I lifted the lid. Paper slid softly against wood. I laid out the notarized deed and Grandpa's letter side by side for everyone to see. 6 months ago, I said, keeping my voice steady. Grandpa legally transferred the cabin to me. It was completed before he died. It isn't part of the estate. Silence fell so fast you could hear the refrigerator hum in the kitchen. My dad reached for the deed, reading every line, every stamp. My mom's mouth opened and didn't close. Josh went pale, the kind of pale that erases bravado. This is notarized, Dad said quietly, and that's definitely his signature. I turned the party letter toward the lamp and placed it next to Grandpa's shaky script from the box. The difference was brutal. One carried tremor. The other carried confidence. One belonged to a man at the end of a long, good life. The other belonged to someone with a steady hand and a plan. Josh? My mother whispered, voice thinning. Did you write this? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And if you're enjoying this story, give it a like. It really helps the channel. Comment below what you would have done in this situation. The silence clung to the room like fog. My father kept scanning the notarized deed, lips pressed into a thin line. My mother's hands trembled against the letter Josh had waved so proudly minutes earlier. And Josh, he just stood there, pale and rigid, like he'd been caught in the middle of a spotlight he never wanted. Finally, Mom whispered it out loud. Josh, did you forge this? He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. I felt a knot tighten in my chest. Anger, yes, but also disbelief. He had taken our grandfather's memory, a man barely buried, and twisted it into a cheap performance for applause. Josh's jaw flexed, his voice breaking the tension. You don't understand, he blurted. It's not fair she gets everything. Everything? I echoed, my voice sharp, cracking under the weight of his words. What are you even talking about? You were always Grandpa's favorite, he snapped. His words came fast like floodwaters breaching a dam, always visiting him, always helping him. The perfect grandchild. The rest of us barely got scraps of his attention. The sting of his resentment hit harder than I expected. All those years I thought he'd simply been uninterested in the cabin. Turns out he was watching, tallying, resenting. My father's voice cut in, stern and weighted. Son, resentment doesn't justify forging legal documents. That's fraud. It could ruin your life. Josh flinched, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. You don't get it. I just wanted, just once, for people to see me as the one Grandpa trusted. For Teresa to look at me like I mattered. For all of you to stop looking at Jules like she hung the moon. Teresa, who had been sitting quietly until then, rose slowly. Her face was pale, her hands gripping her purse strap like a lifeline. I think I should go, she murmured, avoiding his desperate gaze. Teresa, wait. It's not what it looks like. Josh reached for her, but she pulled away, the front door shutting behind her with a final thud. The room grew heavy again. My father's face hardened. My mother looked torn between disbelief and heartbreak. Jenna caught my eye, giving me a subtle nod of support. Josh slumped into a chair, his bravado slipping. His voice came out low, almost defeated. "Fine, you've made your point. You win, Jules." "This isn't about winning," I said, my throat tight. "This is about Grandpa's truth. He trusted me with the cabin because I loved it like he did. That doesn't mean he didn't love you." Something flickered across Josh's face. Shame, maybe, or grief. But before I could process it, I remembered something else. Something tucked away in the cedar box. "There's more," I said quietly. I reached back inside and pulled out a sealed envelope. My heart stuttered when I saw the name written in Grandpa's shaky script, Josh. I held it out to him. "He left you something too." His hands hovered, suspicious, torn between pride and curiosity. Finally he took it and tore it open. As his eyes scanned the page, his face shifted, defiance fading into shock, then softening into something raw, vulnerable, almost broken. "He knew," Josh whispered. "Even from the grave, he knew what I'd try to do." "Read it," I urged. He hesitated, then handed it to Mom. Her voice shook as she read Grandpa's words aloud to all of us. "Josh, if you're holding this letter, it means Jules has opened the cedar box. I know you, son. You've always wanted recognition, always needed to be seen. Sometimes that need makes you reckless. The cabin belongs to Jules. It's her place and she'll honor it. But I've left you something else. Inside is a check for $25,000. Use it to build something of your own. Find what makes you feel alive. The way the cabin makes Jules feel alive. This isn't about favorites. It's about finding your own path. And remember, the cabin door will always be open to you, if you come in love." When Mom's voice cracked on the last words, no one could hold back their tears, not even Josh. He stared at the check folded in his shaking hand, his chest rising and falling unevenly. For once, my brother didn't look like a man scheming for applause. He just looked lost. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And if you're enjoying this story, give it a like. It really helps the channel. Comment below what you would have done in this situation. Josh sat there, shoulders hunched, the check trembling in his grip. His eyes, red-rimmed and hollow, shifted from the paper to me. For the first time in years, he wasn't puffed up or performing. He was just Josh, my brother, flawed, jealous, desperate, but human. "I'm sorry," he said hoarsely. The words didn't come easy. They dragged out of him like heavy stones. "I had no right to try and take what Grandpa already gave you." I swallowed hard. Forgiveness wasn't rushing to my lips, but I also heard Grandpa's voice echoing in my head. "When you're holding the truth, you don't need to crush anyone with it. Let it stand. It'll do the work for you." "There's one more thing," I said, reaching back into the cedar box. I pulled out a worn photo album, its leather edges frayed. I laid it open on the table. Photos spilled across the pages. Josh and me as kids building sandcastles by the lake. Marshmallows blackened over the fire pit. Grandpa grinning with his arms wrapped around both of us. Josh's fingers grazed the images. His face cracked, grief pouring through. "He kept all of this?" "He never stopped hoping you'd come around," I said softly. The weight of the evening pressed down on everyone. My parents exchanged weary glances, torn between anger at Josh and love for the son they couldn't stop caring for. Jenna gave me a small nod of encouragement, like she knew the next step was mine to take. I drew a steady breath. The cabin was meant to bring family together, not drive us apart. That's what Grandpa wanted. So Josh, the door will always be open, but only if you come in truth. Josh blinked at me, stunned. His lips parted, but no words came. The weeks that followed weren't simple. The fallout was messy. My parents struggled to trust Josh again. Teresa stopped returning his calls. And me? I wasn't sure whether to believe his apology or wait for proof in his actions. But 3 weeks later, a text came. "Can we talk at the cabin?" Every instinct screamed caution. But Grandpa's words, "Forgiveness is more for you than for them," echoed. So I said yes. That Saturday, I sat on the porch swing with a mug of coffee, the lake stretching out like glass. When Josh's car rolled up, I braced myself. He stepped out slower, quieter, humbled. "This place hasn't changed," he said. glancing around. "That's the point," I replied, gesturing for him to sit. For a while, we just listened to the lap of the water. Finally, he spoke. "I've been jealous of you my whole life. Jealous of what you had with him. I thought if I had the cabin, it would fill the hole. But it didn't. It just made me emptier." He admitted something else, too. He'd cashed Grandpa's check and signed up for a woodworking course Grandpa used to nudge him toward. "I'm terrible," he said with a shaky laugh. "But for once I feel calm. Like I'm building something instead of destroying it." Something inside me softened. Maybe it was the honesty. Maybe it was hearing that he was finally trying. I stood and beckoned him inside, to the old roll-top desk. I unlocked it with the brass key from the cedar box. Inside were folders, each marked with names. I handed him the one labeled Josh. He opened it and froze. Clippings of his high school debate championship, a photo of his college graduation, even a printout of the webpage announcing his last promotion. "He kept all this?" Josh whispered. "Every scrap," I said. "He was proud of you. He just showed it differently than you wanted." Tears slipped down his cheeks. He looked smaller, younger, like the boy I grew up with, not the man who tried to steal a cabin. I handed him a calendar. "These are the weekends I'll be here for repairs. If you want to help, even with bad woodworking, the invitation's open." Josh looked up, stunned. "Even after everything I did?" I held his gaze. "Especially after. The cabin's for family. That's what Grandpa wanted." That afternoon, we dangled our feet off the dock, the lake cool beneath us, the sun dipping gold behind the mountains. Josh pitched renovation ideas, his words hesitant but hopeful, and as I listened, I realized the truth. Grandpa hadn't just left me a cabin. He'd left me the responsibility of keeping us tethered to what mattered: family, forgiveness, the quiet power of truth. The cabin keys jingled in my pocket, heavy with memory and meaning. For the first time since his funeral, I felt peace. Because even in death, Grandpa had orchestrated one last lesson. Sometimes revenge isn't about destroying someone. It's about letting the truth unravel them, and then giving them a chance to put themselves back together. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. And if you're enjoying this story, give it a like. It really helps the channel. Comment below. Would you have forgiven Josh or cut him off forever?